On the lineup today, a nightmare in Philadelphia, a rivalry in New York, and much more. Stay tuned. I'm joined here today by Matt Merton, and Matt, we'll talk about our first topic here for today's show, which happens to be the Eagles. Matt?
Thank you, Joe. Well, to say that the Philadelphia Eagles season this year has been a disappointment would be a massive understatement. Once again, entering the season with high expectation, the Birds have crashed quickly, standing in the cellar of the NFC with a 3-8 record and suffering through their worst losing streak since 1994. What went wrong? What went right would be the easier question. The offensive line is in shambles, unable to effectively protect quarterbacks Michael Vick and Nick Foles. The offense leads the league with 27 turnovers. The defense has struggled heavily against weak offenses, such as the Carolina Panthers. Their big stars, such as Michael Vick, LaShawn McCoy, and Deshaun Jackson, have all struggled with health issues. And not only the team, but the city of Philadelphia has lost faith in head coach Andy Reid, who is all but certain to be leaving Philly at the end of the season. So going into 2013, the Eagles have a lot of work ahead of them in order to stay competitive in a difficult NFC East. And I got to say, just between the Eagles, the Phils, the Flyers not playing a season, the Sixers struggling without Andrew Bynum, it's not a good time to be a sports fan in Philly.
No, it's certainly not a good time to be a Philadelphia sports fan. I mean, like you were saying, the Eagles right now are just a complete mess of a team. Their offensive line, which used to be one of the better offensive lines in the entire NFC, now it's due to retirements, guys getting older, injuries. It's just not very good anymore. It seems the only team they can beat are the Giants, who they seem to beat every time. But Michael Vick, obviously, is not the guy. They tried that experiment. It hasn't worked. Nick Foles, could he, maybe if he had a better offensive line and if his receivers were playing a little bit better, be a guy to watch for next year who could maybe lead them to the playoffs? I don't know. It's really a tough question. And as for Andy Reid, I mean, he's been here 14 years. Yeah. It's about time to get some new blood into that coaching system. I think the players have kind of lost touch with him.
Yeah, I'd say the main thing that really tells you how bad they've struggled, just go to like a home game at Lincoln Financial Field. Everyone there is miserable. I remember, like, for this past game with the Panthers, when ESPN was showing like crowd shots of the stadium, like pretty much looked like a third of the seats were empty, just a sea of green seats, and the fans there, they were miserable. They didn't look like they're having any fun whatsoever. A lot of them were like wearing paper bags over their heads and basically booing Andy Reid. The players on the team look miserable. Andy Reid looks like a man defeated. He basically just, no offense, he just looks like a depressed walrus. It's a miserable time, and it's really disappointing.
Yeah, I certainly understand kind of what's going on with the Philly fans right now. Personally, as a Giants fan, I can kind of look at this as somebody who's a little bit emotionally detached from the Eagles. So, I mean, from a more, I guess, objective standpoint, of course, Andy Reid, the tragedy that happened during the preseason with his son dying, you got to think that maybe that could be affecting some of his performance this year. I'm not sure, though. I haven't watched all the Eagles games. But, I mean, that's something that I would think, because he certainly seems to be doing some things this year that in the past he just wouldn't do, and making decisions that make you scratch your head. And he really was one of the better coaches in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, even like with the past couple of years, you have to give Andy Reid credit. Before he came in, the Eagles were, like, again, towards the bottom of the NFC, struggling under Ray Rhodes. He came in, took him to a Super Bowl back in 2005, I believe.
I believe so,
yeah. 2005. Took him to the NFC title games a couple times. Basically the winningest coach in history, beating out such coaches like Dick Vermeil and Buddy Ryan. So you have to give credit where credit is due. But I feel like this team really doesn't, with the talent they have there, they don't have the chemistry that matches with Andy Reid's coaching style. So at this point, it's a good long. I'm sure he'll get a job somewhere else. He is a good coach, but it's not going to be in Philly.
Certainly. All right, well, we have to take a short break, but before we go, we have a trivia question for you. And it's, who is the only NBA player to have played at the collegiate level at the College of New Jersey? We'll have the answer right after this break. Welcome back. Before the break, we asked you who the only NBA player to have played college basketball at TCNJ was, and the answer is Greg Grant, who played from 1989 to 1996 for 6 different teams, including the Knicks and the 76ers. Last Monday night, the Knicks traveled all the way from their posh Manhattan home to Brooklyn to take on the Brooklyn Nets for the first time. And it's safe to say that a rivalry was born. The Nets were king for the night, coming away with a 96-89 overtime win, led by a double-double by star point guard Deron Williams, despite strong efforts from Carmelo Anthony and Tyson Chandler of the Knicks. Things were just not clicking for the Knicks, best evidenced by Raymond Felton's shooting 3 for 19, a performance reminiscent of John Starks in the 93-94 finals. As poor as the Knicks played, the Nets were that much better. Reggie Evans had 14 boards in 18 minutes, and Jerry Stackhouse, who apparently is still playing, added 14 points off the bench. The crowd, consisting of only slightly more Nets fans than Knicks fans, was into the game from the opening tip to the closing buzzer, with some good-natured verbal sparring taking place throughout the game. The game had a playoff atmosphere, something the Knicks-Nets rivalry has sorely been missing since its inception, and this Hoops rivalry is just what the city of New York needs, and quite frankly, I'm looking forward to their next matchup on December 11th at the Barclays Center. And Matt, could you imagine something better for basketball right now than to finally have a big-time rivalry in the number 1 market in the country like the Knicks and Nets?
Yeah, I got to say, especially good for Brooklyn, considering that the last sports team they had was the Dodgers back in the 50s with Jackie Robinson and stuff. So it's definitely good for them. And it's also good that now that both teams are actually at a sort of a similar playing level, both doing extraordinarily well in the Atlantic Division. Because usually what it's been is, like, usually when the Nets have been good, like when they went to the finals with Jason Kidd, the Knicks haven't been good, vice versa. And it certainly hasn't been this big a rivalry, even during their days in New Jersey. It's usually been, when you think of a Knicks rivalry, it's pretty much like Knicks Heat. So this is definitely really good. They got a lot of talent, and especially with a somewhat weak Atlantic Division. I mean, obviously the Raptors are not really going to be going anywhere. Sixers are struggling without Bynum. Their only true offensive star is Drew Holiday, and the Celtics are getting older and suffering and having a weak defense without Kevin Garnett. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how the Nets and Knicks battle it out for the two in the East. Yeah, and certainly one of the things that you could take away from watching that game is there was a point where Carmelo Anthony was at the free throw line, and the Knicks fans were chanting MVP, and they were getting drowned out by the Nets fans who were booing over the top of them. And that's something that when the Nets were in New Jersey, they weren't drawing a lot of fans. No. And now that they're in Brooklyn, I think for the first time, at least that I can remember, there were more Nets fans than Knicks fans at a Knicks game. Yeah, absolutely. You see, because when they've been based in New Jersey with both the Nets and the Devils, because of their locations in like the Meadowlands and in Newark, just because of the areas they were in, they couldn't really draw in that big a fan base. Even the Devils, even this past year when they went for their Stanley Cup run, had attendance trouble, even when they were going up against the Rangers and the Kings in the finals. So,
yeah, but both teams, as of the taping of this, are now tied atop that weaker Atlantic Division, at least weaker than it's been in recent years. Of course, with the Celtics getting another year older, the Raptors kind of in a rebuilding mode. They've got Kyle Lowry. They seem to be moving in the right direction. The Sixers would be moving in the right direction if Andrew Bynum was healthy and going to play at all this year. But right now it looks like he probably won't end up playing this year. And these two teams, with the way that their salaries are, these are going to be the teams for the next couple of years. Absolutely. It's going to be the same group of guys because they just don't have a lot of wiggle room to move around. The Joe Johnson contract for the Nets, they're never going to be able to move that. So, you know, these are going to be the guys for a while. And if this level of rivalry can keep up over the next 2-3 years, it certainly will. These games are going to be must-watch games in the NBA.
Absolutely. And then now the other question is, in terms of against the Eastern Conference as a whole, can either teams put much of a challenge to LeBron and the Heat? I don't really think so. Yeah, it's, again, early to tell. Again, we've only played about a month or so. It's a pretty small sample size with all teams, but it'll certainly provide a much bigger challenge, considering that the other last big challenge to the Heat which would normally be the Bulls with Derrick Rose. They're losing him for much of the season, so it'll be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, well, actually, just building on that point that you made there about, can they match up with the Heat? I don't think so. At least not at this point. Of course, though, if you'd asked me about the Dallas Mavericks 2 years ago in the finals, I'd have said they couldn't match up with the Heat. They ended up pulling off a win because they played very well, and of course the Heat weren't playing well. I think it's just if one of these two teams can catch the Heat at a point where they don't happen to be playing very well, I think that then, yes, they can match up and perhaps overtake them in the playoffs. But I think that that's probably the case for any team in the NBA right now. I mean, you look at it, there's just nobody who can match up with the Heat except for maybe the Lakers.
And again, maybe the Lakers, and even they've been struggling a little bit with the Mike Brown to D'Antoni change. So it'll be fun to watch.
All right, well, we have to take one more break, and we'll be right back with your Take Your Pick segment right after this. Welcome back once again. And now it is time for us to move on to our Take Your Pick segment for Week 14, if you can believe it, of the NFL season. And our first matchup is a good one. It is the Bears against the Vikings.
Yeah, that definitely is a good one, but it's probably going to be not as close as you think, because from the last time they met up, Jay Cutler had just come back from his concussion, and they went 28-10. I think it's going to be like somewhat the same result. Bears are going to basically just push ahead of the Vikings with Cutler and Marshall. Offense is going to be strong. And even the Vikings offense will have a lot of trouble with the Bears defense, especially missing out on Percy Harvin and with only Adrian Peterson as an offensive powerhouse for them.
Yeah, I agree with you on some level that the Bears, yes, probably will end up winning this game. I think it'll be a little bit closer, though, because the Vikings, they've had just Adrian Peterson as their offense before the whole Brett Favre era came along. And so it's not something that's completely new. They haven't always had a passing attack. So they can win with just Adrian Peterson. And, of course, running the ball control, that's huge, especially when you're going up against an offense that features Matt Forte, Brandon Marshall, and Jay Cutler on the Bears. On the defensive side of the ball, obviously, the Bears, far and away the better team.
Absolutely.
Charles Tillman is having an incredible season. His name has been thrown out there for Defensive Player of the Year, possibly. I read an article just the other day that said that he might be an MVP candidate. I don't know about that, but he certainly is having a very good season, and I think that'll help lift the Bears to a victory. And so our next game is going to be the Saints going on the road up to the Meadowlands to face the Giants. Who you got in this one?
I should say at a point ahead that I'm an Eagles fan, so there might be a bit of a bias, but I will say this: when the Giants are on, they are on, and they've been kind of up and down this past season. When they're on, they're on. They're off, they're pretty off. But especially since they're in rather weak NFC East, they've done a really good job, and I think they'll probably do a good job against the Saints, even with Drew Brees. I feel that their offense will come against a rather weak Saints defense, even though it might be a close one. I'm going with the Giants.
As a Giants fan, I'm going to go with the Giants also. It really, though, depends on which Giants team shows up. If it's the one that showed up against San Francisco and Green Bay, they'll win rather easily. If it's the one that showed up against Cincinnati, they're going to have a problem. But the Giants have gotten into a habit, especially over the last couple of years, of playing up to the good teams and playing down to the bad teams. The Saints are a good team, and I think that's going to be the factor here. The Giants are going to play up to their competition. They're going to play a good game. The Saints' defense is nothing to really be afraid of. So Eli Manning and David Wilson, Ahmad Bradshaw, Hakeem Nicks, Victor Cruz, those guys could all have big games. It really just comes down to how many defensive stops they can get. And I think that front four that the Giants have is going to get enough pressure on Breeze to really disrupt their passing game a little bit and come away with the victory. And so our next game is the Lions going up to Green Bay to face the Packers at Lambeau.
I'm going with the Packers on this one. Basically, when you compare Matthew Stafford and Rodgers, you got to go with Rodgers. The Lions have been really inconsistent this year. Calvin Johnson's had a down year. The defense hasn't been as strong. I know the Packers have struggled with injuries on both defense and offensive side. They haven't been as good as they had back in last year. But I still think they're going to come ahead against the Lions. It's not really going to be that close a game.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you here. I'm going to go with the upset pick. I'm going to take the Lions in
Really?
this game. I don't really have sound reasoning why. I just get a feeling the Packers are a little bit down this year. They just had the 5-game winning streak snapped by the Giants in Week 13. I don't know why. Everything tells me in my head that the Packers should win this game, but I get the feeling the Lions might go up there and steal an upset, especially if Calvin Johnson is on. And with the defense playing the way it is, they've got potential that this could be an upset game. I'm going to go with the Lions, and our last game here is the Texans in New England against the Patriots.
All right, this is probably going to be the toughest one because I'm not that much of a Patriots fan, but I can tell you they are really dangerous right now. They've been dominant these past couple of weeks, and the Texans, I still think they're the best team in the AFC. They haven't been quite as dominant as the Patriots have. I know Patriots' offense might be struggling because they're going to be coming up against a stellar defense that probably would go up against the Bears for the best defense of the league, with J.J. Watt as another contender for Defensive Player of the Year. And the Patriots, again, having lost a little bit of offense with Gronkowski and Hernandez. Tough pick, but I'm going to go with the Texans. Really close game.
Yeah, I'm going with the Patriots. The Texans are a very good team. They're probably the most complete team in the NFL. But the Patriots simply do not lose in Foxborough. Unless they're facing the Giants, they don't lose at home. And so you've got to pick the Patriots. No matter if they're having a good year, a so-so year, you got to pick the Patriots at home, especially against a team like Houston, who's used to playing their games in Houston. Now they're going to go up into a chilly Foxborough, out in the elements, something they're not used to. They might have a little bit of trouble against the Patriots in Week 14. And so that pretty much wraps it up here. We're all out of time for today's show. We hope that you've enjoyed this edition of Lions Lineup. And remember, if you would like to become a part of Lions Lineup or work for LTV, email our account at ltv@tcnj.edu. For Matt Merton and all of us here at LTV, I'm Joe Vasile. We'll see you next time.